I got into a discussion on social media, my Facebook group, with a guy who claimed that all I ever posted was pictures of pretty people. That bothered me because that's really not the case. Our job isn't just to take pictures, it's to make pictures. There's a lot more to it than just pointing a camera at someone. There's makeup, posing, lighting, composition. And then after all that, we can take it into Photoshop and fix whatever we think needs to be fixed. So that's what I do. And that's what I hope to teach in this program. I grabbed a few seniors and blurred their faces because I wanted to show that there's more to a successful photograph than a pretty face. When you see a gorgeous portrait, try this. Cover up the face. Is the photo still as pretty? Yeah, there are times when the face is the photo, but most of the time our job is to make sure everything coordinates with the subject. Remember, we are responsible for every inch of that image. You know, I've heard those two myths ever since the 1980s when I became a photographer. People think, or we imagine that they think, they don't want to be posed and that they want to look natural. Well, heck, who wants to look posed or feel unnatural? But the truth is, they don't want to look overposed, and they don't want the light to look too flashy. They want to feel real and natural. But let's not extrapolate that to assume we can't use subtle and skillful posing techniques or light control to help them look their best. We can photograph them in their environments and with their stuff to help them feel comfortable and who they are. That is what being a professional photographer is really about. It's not about being sloppy or lazy with posing or lighting. Producing professional results while making them feel totally natural isn't easy, but it should be our goal. That's what they're paying us for. If all we do is point a camera at them, they can go anywhere and have anyone do that. And that's why too many these days just have a friend photograph them with their cell phones. What would life be without a little controversy, right? Well, let's try to put out that fire with a little education. There aren't any precise definitions of these terms, but there really should be, so that we can communicate accurately. So this is what I came up with. Sometimes you'll hear a photographer, and often a wedding photographer, say if the lighting's bad, you just turn up the ISO. The sunset background is very nice, but obviously the subject is way underexposed. So let's leave the camera settings and just turn up the ISO. Okay, now we have a properly exposed subject, but we lost that pretty sunset background. But look what happens if we add just one light. The sunset that was invisible before is gorgeous here. And if we reduce the exposure on the background a bit, we get a more saturated color. A photographer needs to know how to do this kind of light control. This is pretty typical of today's look when the photographer is exposed for the face and let everything else blow out. This isn't what I want either. This is what I want. A proper exposure on the face and detail in the highlights. This program will teach you how to accomplish this for a more professional look. I know this all sounds like a rant, but really it's about education and furthering the profession. This image is not acceptable, and it would take a lot of work to make it saleable. There's an easier way. Simply using TTL flash and one LED couldn't be easier. and yields results like this. I'll teach you how to do all this in this course. Some lighting techniques being used today, like for the image on the left, were considered mistakes years ago. Well, guess what? They still are mistakes. One on-camera flash bounced off the ceiling to my right was all it took to fix this. Same story inside. The exposure is fine here, but the lighting is poor. We can't rely on ISO to save bad light. Just one flash unit in a softbox can overpower that bad light. It's possible to get decent results without adding light, such as when excellent light is already there. But when it isn't, you'll spend more time at the computer fixing it than you would have had you lit it properly. For this image, I tried it without adding light because to my eye it seemed that there was a hint of the kind of light that I wanted. This was the final result, but as you can imagine, it took a lot of Photoshop work to get there. I lit this image with one TTL softbox above her and to our right. And here's all I had to do for the final result. Just some cleanup. This is way easier than all the work that I had to do on the first example. That is why I get so worked up over proper lighting. To finish off this part of the discussion, I'm posting 2 images by Nikki Harrison. In my mind, she's the best at editing images. She brings out all the potential in an image to make beautiful, breathtaking pieces of art. But she also tries to find the best way to get to that end. And sometimes it's quicker to light the person. Then work your Photoshop magic. This image was captured dark to maintain highlight detail. But that requires some heavy lifting to get it to look like this. As you can see, she's the best at this sort of thing. And she allowed me to use these to help teach when to use natural light and when to use additional light, whether that be flash or continuous light. And if you're interested, this is where you can buy the digital tools that Nikki uses to get those kinds of results. You can see here that there's a mismatch between the expression and the lighting, so natural light wasn't the best choice. This image was lit with a softbox for a main light. In general, a good main light is needed if the subject is looking at the camera, and especially if he or she is smiling. But I don't want you to think we have to manipulate the light for every image. For a sullen mood, overcast light is just fine, especially if they aren't looking at the camera. Tilting the subject's head up to the light is always a good alternative when the sky is the main source of illumination. Another thing to consider is that for a spontaneous capture like this, the lighting doesn't have to be perfect. I used TTL off-camera flash here, and we have a nice balance of sky to foreground. But this is the one that the client preferred. Why? I don't know, maybe because they felt it was more natural. That's something to keep in mind. I'll often shoot an image with flash because I know the light will be very clean. But then I'll also shoot one without flash if I anticipate doing something more artistic with it. I prefer natural light for these types of images. Sometimes introducing additional lighting might give you a better exposure, but cause some other unforeseeable problems like the unflattering shadowing on her dress. So in cases like that, just letting the light be lends itself to a more emotional outcome. There's another consideration to choose existing light or added light, and that's unwanted shadows. This is a pullback for the next series of images. We want the light high because that's where we're accustomed to see light coming from. So I had her tilt her head up to avoid a shadow from her hat. But I don't like her head up like that. But if we bring her head down, we get a nasty shadow that would be very hard to fix in Photoshop. So I turned off the flash and got this. Obviously her face is too dark, but the light on her face is at least shadowless. That was relatively easy to fix, along with some other stuff that needed fixing. So using existing light required some Photoshop work, but it was the better choice here. What about shooting with virtually no directional light on the subject? Can that work? Here I exposed for a balance between the window and the fireplace, so exposure-wise it's fine. But no light on the subject means no money in my pocket. Raising the overall levels to get an appropriate exposure on the face blows out the window but results in a nice high-key image. And that's okay. Can we do better? I lightened that statue and made it better. Can we do better still? Oh, you bet. By adding off-camera flash to light the subject, we made her look better, and we retained the pretty pastel colors around her.